The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on Cedar Creek's main street as Maya Rodriguez hurried toward Mercy General Hospital, her worn leather shoes clicking against the cracked sidewalk. It was August 1955, and the air hung thick with humidity and the weight of unspoken rules that governed this small town 30 miles outside of Houston. Maya's mixed heritage, her father's Mexican roots and her mother's African-American lineage, made her a target in a place where people were expected to fit neatly into predetermined boxes. At 22, she had learned to navigate the hostile terrain of Cedar Creek with her head down and her dreams tucked safely away. "There goes the Rodriguez girl," whispered Mrs. Patterson from her porch, loud enough for Maya to hear. "Don't know why she doesn't just move to the colored side of town where she belongs." Maya's jaw tightened, but she kept walking. 3 blocks later, she reached the hospital's service entrance, where she'd worked as a night custodian for the past 2 years. The job paid barely enough to cover rent for her tiny apartment above Hernandez's grocery store, but it was work in Cedar Creek that was more than many people like her could hope for. Dr. Eleanor Hartwell, the hospital's head of nursing, was waiting by the employee entrance with a grim expression. In her 50s, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a perfect bun, Dr. Hartwell was one of the few people in town who treated Maya with basic human decency. "Maya, I need to speak with you before your shift," Dr. Hartwell said, her voice heavy with reluctance. Inside the small break room, Dr. Hartwell closed the door and turned to face Maya with troubled eyes. "The town council passed a new ordinance yesterday. I fought against it, but—" She paused, reaching into her desk drawer and pulling out a small brass bell attached to a leather cord. Maya stared at the object, her heart sinking. "What is that for?" "Anyone classified as mixed blood is required to wear this in public spaces," Dr. Hartwell explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mayor Thompson says it's for community safety and social order." "I'm so sorry, Maya. I tried to fight it, but the hospital receives municipal funding, and they threaten to cut it if we don't comply." The bell felt cold and heavy in Maya's trembling hands. She understood immediately. This wasn't about safety. It was about marking her, humiliating her, making her visible as someone who didn't belong. "How many others?" Maya asked quietly. "In the whole town? Maybe 15 people. You're the only one who works here." Maya tied the bell around her wrist, its gentle chime seeming to echo through the empty break room like a funeral toll. Each movement sent a soft, musical reminder of her outsider status. "I want you to know," Dr. Hartwell said, placing a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder, "that this doesn't change how I see you. You're one of the hardest workers we have, and you have every right to hold your head high." That night, Maya moved through the hospital corridors like a ghost, the bell's soft chiming announcing her presence to everyone within earshot. She cleaned rooms, emptied trash bins, and mopped floors while nurses and doctors pretended not to notice the musical accompaniment to her work. In the pediatric ward, she paused outside little Tommy Martinez's room. The 8-year-old had been hospitalized for weeks with pneumonia, and Maya had grown fond of him during her nightly rounds. His mother worked double shifts at the textile factory and could only visit on weekends. "Miss Maya?" Tommy called softly as she began cleaning his room. "Yes, sweetie." "Why do you have a bell? Are you getting married?" Maya's throat tightened. "No, honey. It's just something I have to wear." "It sounds pretty," Tommy said with innocent honesty, "like my grandma's wind chimes." In that moment, Maya realized that the bell's meaning depended entirely on who was listening. To Tommy, it was just a pleasant sound. To the town council, it was a mark of shame. But what did it mean to her? As her shift ended and dawn broke over Cedar Creek, Maya walked home through empty streets, the bell chiming softly with each step. She had a choice to make: let this symbol break her spirit, or find a way to reclaim its meaning. She thought about her parents who had fallen in love despite the world telling them they shouldn't. Her father, Miguel, had been a mechanic with calloused hands and a gentle heart. Her mother, Ruth, had been a seamstress with a voice like honey and dreams bigger than Texas. They had died in a car accident when Maya was 16, leaving her alone in a world that saw her existence as a problem to be solved. But they had also left her with something precious, the knowledge that love could transcend the boundaries that society tried to impose. As she climbed the stairs to her small apartment, Maya made a silent promise to her parents' memory. She would not let Cedar Creek's hatred define her. The bell would ring, but she would decide what song it played. 2 weeks after the Bell Ordinance went into effect, Cedar Creek was buzzing with preparations for the annual hospital charity gala. The event, held every September, was the town's biggest social gathering, where the wealthy elite donated money to support the hospital's expansion, while congratulating themselves on their civic duty. Maya typically avoided the gala entirely, but this year Dr. Hartwell had asked her to work the event, helping with coat check and maintaining the restrooms throughout the evening. The extra pay would help her save money for her secret dream, nursing school application she kept hidden in her bedroom drawer. "I know it's not ideal," Dr. Hartwell had explained, "but I trust you more than anyone else to handle the responsibilities. Plus, the event staff will be too busy to pay much attention to, well, to anything else." The anything else was the bell, which Maya now wore as naturally as breathing, though it still stung each time someone stared or whispered. On the morning of the gala, Maya was surprised to see a commotion outside the train station as she walked to work. A small crowd had gathered, and she could hear Mayor Thompson's booming voice cutting through the autumn air. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to welcome home one of Cedar Creek's finest sons, Sergeant Thomas Mitchell." Maya lingered at the edge of the crowd, curiosity overcoming her usual desire to remain invisible. Through the gaps between people, she caught sight of a tall man in his late 20s wearing a crisp army uniform decorated with ribbons and medals. What struck her immediately wasn't his military bearing or his sandy brown hair, but the white cane in his right hand and the dark sunglasses that couldn't quite hide the scarring around his eyes. "Thomas lost his sight serving our great nation in Korea," Mayor Thompson continued, his voice dripping with the kind of performative patriotism that Maya had learned to recognize. "But he's shown the kind of courage and determination that makes America great." Polite applause rippled through the crowd, but Maya noticed how people maintained a careful distance from Thomas, as if his blindness might be contagious. She watched as he stood straight and proud, accepting the hollow praise with dignity despite being treated like a prop in the mayor's political theater. "Thomas will be staying at the Grayson boarding house while he adjusts to civilian life," the mayor announced. "I'm sure the whole community will welcome him with open arms." As the crowd dispersed, Maya found herself walking behind Thomas and Mrs. Grayson, an elderly widow who ran the town's only boarding house. She could hear their conversation as they made their slow progress down Main Street. "Now, Thomas, don't you worry about a thing," Mrs. Grayson was saying in the overly loud voice people often used with anyone they perceived as disabled. "I've got a nice room on the first floor, and I'll make sure to announce when I'm approaching so I don't startle you." "That's very kind, Mrs. Grayson," Thomas replied, his voice carrying a slight edge of weariness. "But I don't need special treatment. I just need to know where things are, and I can manage fine." Maya found herself admiring his quiet confidence, the way he navigated the uneven sidewalk with his cane while maintaining a conversation. When they passed Hernandez's grocery store, old Mr. Hernandez waved enthusiastically at Thomas, who obviously couldn't see the gesture, while completely ignoring Maya despite the clear sound of her bell. The irony wasn't lost on her. Thomas was being celebrated for his service while being treated like a fragile object, while she was being punished for her existence while being treated like a threat. Both of them were trapped by other people's assumptions. That evening, Maya arrived at the hospital early to prepare for the gala. The main lobby had been transformed with white tablecloths, crystal chandeliers, and elaborate flower arrangements that filled the air with the scent of roses and baby's breath. A small stage had been set up for the evening's entertainment, a local jazz quartet that would provide background music for the wealthy attendees' conversations. Dr. Hartwell had arranged for Maya to work primarily in the back areas, checking coats and restocking supplies, minimizing her contact with the guests. But as the evening wore on, the steady chime of her bell drew curious stares and whispered conversations. "Is that the mixed girl with the bell?" she heard one woman ask her companion. "Disgusting," came the reply. "In my day, people like that knew their place." Maya focused on her work, folding coats with mechanical precision and trying to ignore the way her hands shook each time the bell rang. She thought about nursing school, about the applications hidden in her drawer, about the possibility of a life beyond Cedar Creek's suffocating prejudices. Around 9 o'clock, she noticed a commotion near the main entrance. Thomas Mitchell had arrived, accompanied by Mrs. Grayson and wearing a well-tailored black suit that somehow made his war medals look even more distinguished. He moved confidently despite the unfamiliar environment, his cane sweeping gracefully as he oriented himself to the space. Maya watched from her position near the coat check as Thomas was introduced to various dignitaries and socialites. Each conversation followed the same pattern: effusive praise for his service, followed by awkward attempts to help him navigate or eat, followed by polite excuses to move on to someone less complicated. She could see the frustration building in Thomas's posture, the way his jaw tightened each time someone grabbed his arm, without permission, or spoke to Mrs. Grayson instead of directly to him. "Mrs. Grayson," she heard him say quietly during a lull in the introductions, "I think I'd like to step outside for some air." "Oh, but Thomas, you haven't eaten anything yet. Let me fix you a plate." "I can manage my own food," Thomas said firmly but politely. "I just need a few minutes." Maya watched him make his way toward the side door that led to the hospital's small garden. On impulse, she followed, her bell chiming softly as she moved through the lobby. She told herself she was just checking to make sure he found the door safely, but deep down she recognized something familiar in his isolation. In the garden, Thomas stood alone under the stars, his face tilted upward as if trying to see through the darkness that had claimed his sight. Maya hesitated at the doorway, unsure whether to approach or leave him in peace. Then Thomas turned his head slightly, clearly having heard her bell. "You don't have to hide," he said softly. "I'm not going to bite." Maya stepped into the garden, her heart racing. It was the first time anyone had acknowledged her presence that evening without judgment or fear. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I just wanted to make sure you found the door okay." Thomas smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him all evening. "Thank you. That's the first time tonight anyone's treated me like I might actually be capable of taking care of myself." The bell chimed as Maya shifted nervously. "I know the feeling." "That's an interesting sound," Thomas said, tilting his head slightly. "What is it?" For a moment Maya considered lying, making up some innocent explanation. But something about Thomas's direct manner, his lack of visible judgment, made her decide on honesty. "It's a bell," she said simply. "I'm required to wear it." "Required? By whom?" "The town council, because I'm—" She paused, then decided to use their language. "Because I'm mixed blood." Thomas was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. When he spoke again, his voice was filled with a quiet anger that Maya recognized all too well. "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard," he said. "And I've heard a lot of ridiculous things lately." Standing there in the garden, with music drifting from the gala and stars shining overhead, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the simple pleasure of being seen as a human being, bell and all. Neither of them knew it yet, but this moment would change everything. The jazz quartet had been playing for over an hour when disaster struck the hospital gala. The lead singer, a renowned performer from Houston, suddenly doubled over with stomach pains and had to be rushed to the emergency room, leaving the evening's entertainment in shambles. Maya watched from her station near the coat check as Mayor Thompson frantically whispered to Dr. Hartwell, his face red with embarrassment. The wealthy donors were growing restless, their conversations becoming louder and more animated as they consumed the free champagne. "We need to do something," she heard Mrs. Patterson tell her husband. "People are starting to leave and we haven't even reached our fundraising goal." Dr. Hartwell approached the microphone with visible reluctance. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to an unexpected medical emergency, our featured entertainment for the evening is unable to continue. However, the quartet will keep playing, and we encourage you to enjoy the dancing and continue supporting our worthy cause." A murmur of disappointment rippled through the crowd. Maya noticed several couples heading toward the coat check, clearly ready to call it an early night. The charity gala was turning into a social catastrophe. It was then that Thomas Mitchell stepped forward. Maya watched in amazement as he approached Dr. Hartwell with Mrs. Grayson trailing nervously behind him. "Excuse me, Dr. Hartwell," Thomas said clearly, his voice carrying across the increasingly noisy room. "I couldn't help but overhear your situation. I wonder if I might be of assistance." Dr. Hartwell looked puzzled. "I'm sorry, Thomas, but I'm not sure how." "I used to sing," Thomas said simply. "Before the war, I was actually studying music at the University of Texas before I enlisted." The room gradually quieted as people caught wind of this unexpected development. Maya found herself holding her breath, wondering if Thomas realized he was about to become a spectacle. "I know it's not the same as having a professional performer," Thomas continued, "but if it would help the evening, I'd be happy to sing a few songs." Mayor Thompson practically pushed Dr. Hartwell aside to reach the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, our very own war hero, Sergeant Thomas Mitchell, has graciously offered to provide entertainment for the remainder of the evening." Maya cringed at the mayor's theatrical tone, but Thomas simply nodded graciously and made his way to the small stage. The quartet leader, a middle-aged man named Ray, quickly consulted with Thomas about song choices and key signatures. When Thomas began to sing, the room fell completely silent. His voice was rich and warm, with a slight roughness that spoke of experience and pain. He started with Blue Moon, his interpretation slower and more soulful than the usual upbeat version. Maya felt goosebumps rise on her arms as Thomas's voice filled the lobby, transforming the space from a mere fundraiser into something approaching sacred. By the time he moved into The Way You Look Tonight, couples had begun to gather on the makeshift dance floor. Maya watched from her corner as Cedar Creek's elite swayed together, their earlier disappointment forgotten in the magic of Thomas's unexpected gift. But it was during his third song, a haunting rendition of Summertime, that Maya's carefully maintained composure began to crack. The song spoke of pain and hope, of dreams deferred but not destroyed, and she found herself thinking of her parents, of nursing school, of all the possibilities that seemed forever out of reach. She was so lost in the music that she didn't notice the bell's gentle chiming as she swayed slightly to the rhythm. But Thomas heard it. As the song ended to enthusiastic applause, Thomas paused and tilted his head, clearly listening for something. Maya froze, realizing she'd drawn attention to herself. "Ray," Thomas said to the quartet leader, "could you play something a little more upbeat? Maybe In the Mood. As the familiar swing melody began, Thomas stepped down from the stage and began moving confidently toward Maya's corner of the room. She watched in growing panic as he navigated between tables and chairs, clearly following the sound of her bell. The room's attention shifted to follow Thomas's progress, and Maya felt every eye in the gala focused on her. Her instinct was to flee, but there was nowhere to go without creating an even bigger scene. "Excuse me," Thomas said when he reached her, extending his hand with a warm smile. "I've been listening to your music all evening, and I was wondering if you'd like to dance." Maya stared at his outstretched hand, her mind racing. Around them, conversations had stopped entirely. She could feel the weight of every gaze, could practically hear the mental calculations as Cedar Creek's elite tried to process what they were witnessing. I can't," Maya whispered, acutely aware of the bell on her wrist and what it represented. "Why not?" Thomas asked gently. "The music is beautiful, and I'd consider it an honor." Mayor Thompson started to move forward, clearly intending to intervene, but Dr. Hartwell caught his arm and shook her head firmly. Maya looked around the room at the sea of shocked faces. Mrs. Patterson looked like she might faint. Several men appeared ready to step in and rescue Thomas from his apparent mistake. But Maya also saw something else in a few faces: curiosity, perhaps even admiration for Thomas's unconscious act of rebellion. "They can hear my bell," Maya said quietly, hoping Thomas would understand the implication. Thomas's smile widened slightly. "I've been hearing it all evening. It's been the most beautiful sound in this whole stuffy room." Without waiting for her response, Thomas gently took her hand and led her onto the dance floor. The bell chimed softly as they moved, but for the first time since she'd been forced to wear it, the sound didn't feel like shame. It felt like music. Thomas was an excellent dancer, leading with confidence and grace despite his blindness. He held Maya gently but firmly, guiding her through the steps of a classic swing dance as if they'd been partners for years. "What's your name?" he asked as they moved together. "Maya Rodriguez." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Maya. I'm Thomas." Around them, the room remained frozen in shock. A few couples had tentatively returned to dancing, but most of the guests simply stared at the unprecedented sight of a war hero dancing with the town's mixed-blood pariah. "You know they're all staring," Maya said quietly. "Good," Thomas replied with a slight grin. "Let them stare. Maybe they'll learn something." As the song continued, Maya began to relax into the dance. Thomas's blindness meant he couldn't see the color of her skin, couldn't see the judgment in other people's eyes, couldn't see the visual markers that determined someone's worth in Cedar Creek. All he could perceive was her humanity, her kindness in checking on him in the garden, the gentle music of her bell. "You're a wonderful dancer," Thomas said as the song neared its end. "So are you." "Where did you learn?" "My mother taught me. She said every gentleman should know how to dance." His expression grew wistful. "She died while I was overseas." "I'm sorry," Maya said softly. "I lost my parents too, in a car accident." "I'm sorry to hear that. It's hard being alone in the world." As the final notes of "In the Mood" faded away, Thomas and Maya remained on the dance floor for a moment, still holding hands. The room was so quiet that the bell's gentle chiming seemed to echo through the space. Then the applause began, tentative at first, led by Dr. Hartwell, but gradually building as more people found the courage to acknowledge what they'd witnessed. It wasn't unanimous. Several guests had already left in disgust, but it was enough. "Thank you for the dance, Maya," Thomas said, releasing her hand with obvious reluctance. "Thank you for asking," she replied, her voice barely audible over the continued applause. As Thomas returned to the stage for one final song, Maya retreated to her station behind the coat check. But something fundamental had changed. The bell was still there, the stairs were still hostile, and Cedar Creek's prejudices hadn't magically disappeared. But for the first time in her life, Maya had experienced what it felt like to be chosen, to be valued, to be seen as worthy of respect and affection. And that feeling, she realized, was something no ordinance could take away. The morning after the gala dawned gray and oppressive, with storm clouds gathering over Cedar Creek like a physical manifestation of the town's mood. Maya arrived at work to find Dr. Hartwell waiting for her with a troubled expression and a manila envelope in her hands. "Maya, we need to talk," Dr. Hartwell said, her voice heavy with regret. In the break room, Dr. Hartwell closed the door and sat down across from Maya. "I've received complaints, lots of them. The town council is furious about what happened last night." Maya's heart sank, but she kept her voice steady. "I didn't do anything wrong. Thomas asked me to dance, and I said yes." "I know that, and you know that," Dr. Hartwell replied. "But Mayor Thompson is claiming you deliberately disrupted the gala and violated the spirit of the Bell Ordinance. He's demanding that the hospital terminate your employment." "And are you going to?" Maya asked quietly. Dr. Hartwell was silent for a long moment, her fingers drumming against the table. "I've been fighting this all morning. The hospital board is split. Half of them think firing you would be an overreaction, but the other half are worried about losing municipal funding." She opened the manila envelope and pulled out several documents. "However, there's something else. Mrs. Catherine Brennan attended the gala last night." Maya recognized the name. Mrs. Brennan was a wealthy widow from Houston who had donated substantial amounts to various charities throughout Texas. "Mrs. Brennan was impressed by what she witnessed," Dr. Hartwell continued. "She said it was the first time she'd seen genuine courage and grace at a society function. She's offering to match any municipal funding the hospital might lose if we refuse to fire you." Maya stared at the papers, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "But that's not all," Dr. Hartwell added with a slight smile. "Mrs. Brennan learned about your interest in nursing. She's offering to fund your education, full tuition, books, and living expenses if you're accepted to the University of Texas nursing program." I don't understand. Why would she do that?" "Because she believes in justice, and she believes in you. The applications are due next month. I think you should apply." Maya's hands trembled as she looked at the scholarship paperwork. Everything she'd dreamed of was suddenly within reach, but accepting would mean leaving Cedar Creek, leaving the only home she'd ever known, leaving Thomas. "What about Thomas?" she asked. Dr. Hartwell's expression grew complicated. "That's more challenging. He came to see me this morning." Before Maya could respond, there was a knock on the break room door. Dr. Hartwell opened it to reveal Thomas Mitchell, his white cane in one hand and his military cap in the other. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Thomas said politely, "but I was hoping to speak with Maya." Dr. Hartwell glanced between them, then gathered up the scholarship papers. "I'll give you two some privacy. Maya, think about what we discussed." When they were alone, Thomas took the seat Dr. Hartwell had vacated. "I heard about the complaints. I'm sorry if I caused problems for you." "You didn't cause anything," Maya said firmly. "You treated me like a human being. That's not something you should apologize for." Thomas smiled at her directness. "I also heard about Mrs. Brennan's offer. Dr. Hartwell told me about your nursing dreams. How do you feel about that?" "Honestly, I think you should take it." Thomas's voice was steady, but Maya could hear the underlying sadness. "You're too smart and too talented to be trapped in this place. Cedar Creek will never deserve you." "What about you? What will you do?" Thomas was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the table. "I'm not sure yet. I came back here thinking it was home, but home is supposed to be a place where people see you for who you are, not what happened to you or what you look like. Then come with me, Maya said impulsively. Austin has programs for veterans. You could finish your music degree. Thomas looked startled. Maya, we barely know each other. I know enough, she replied. I know you're kind and brave and talented. I know you see people's hearts instead of their skin color. I know that in one evening you made me feel more valued than I have in my entire life. And I know, Thomas said softly, that dancing with you was the first time since I lost my sight that I felt truly free. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both contemplating the possibility of a future beyond Cedar Creek's suffocating prejudices. There's something else, Thomas said eventually. I've been thinking about what you said about the bell, about how they make you wear it. What about it? I think you should keep wearing it even when you leave here. Maya looked at him in confusion. Why would I want to do that? Because you've transformed what it means, Thomas explained. They gave it to you as a symbol of shame, but you've turned it into something beautiful. When I hear that bell, I don't think about their hatred. I think about your courage, your grace, your music. Maya looked down at the small brass bell on her wrist, considering Thomas's words. For weeks she had seen it only as a burden, a mark of her outsider status. But perhaps he was right. Perhaps meaning was something you created, not something that was imposed on you. Will you really consider coming to Austin? She asked. If you'll really consider taking me along, Thomas replied with a smile. 3 weeks later, Maya submitted her nursing school application with Mrs. Brennan's scholarship paperwork attached. Thomas had enrolled in the University of Texas music program and found a small apartment near campus that he could afford with his veterans' benefits. On their last day in Cedar Creek, they met in the hospital garden where they'd first really talked. Maya was wearing her bell as she had every day since the gala, but now its gentle chiming sounded different to her ears, not like a mark of shame, but like a song of freedom. Are you nervous? Thomas asked as they sat on the garden bench. Terrified, Maya admitted, but also excited. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm moving toward something instead of running away from something. I know the feeling. As they prepared to leave Cedar Creek forever, Maya realized that the bell would indeed come with her, not as a reminder of the town's hatred, but as a symbol of her own strength. She had been marked as different, labeled as less than, forced to carry the sound of her own supposed shame. But in the end, it was that very sound that had called Thomas to her, that had announced her presence in a room full of people who wanted her to be invisible, that had provided the music for the most beautiful dance of her life. Some chains, Maya reflected as they walked toward the train station, were meant to be broken, but others could be transformed into something entirely new, something that sang not of captivity, but of the courage to be exactly who you were meant to be. The bell chimed softly as she took Thomas's arm, and together they stepped onto the train that would carry them toward a future where their worth would be measured not by the color of their skin or the clarity of their vision, but by the content of their character and the strength of their love. Behind them, Cedar Creek grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely, taking its prejudices and small-minded cruelties with it. Ahead lay Austin, the university, and the promise of a world where a nurse and a musician could build a life together, free from the bells that others tried to hang around their necks. Maya kept the bell, wearing it proudly as she earned her nursing degree and later as she and Thomas built their life together. But its meaning had been forever transformed, from a symbol of society's judgment to a reminder that true harmony comes not from forcing people into neat categories, but from celebrating the beautiful complexity of human hearts that refuse to be silenced. In the end, the bell that was meant to mark her as different became the very thing that announced her arrival into a life of purpose, love, and dignity. exactly as it should be.